Welcome to Eye Contact. I'm Paul Rosen. Today we're going to talk to Dr. Katsanevaki and Dr. Miltos Balidis about some of the recent developments in corneal cross-linking protocols. Welcome. It's great to have you here and thank you for taking the time to come and talk to us. Since the introduction of cross-linking into clinics, there have been many changes in the original Dresden protocol. And Vicky, perhaps I can ask you, what were the sort of essential features of the original protocol?
Well, I was lucky enough to be in New Orleans back in 1997 when Theo first presented this idea, and at that time it sounded like sci-fi to me. Anyway, years went by and it turned out to be that cross-linking was a very useful tool in our hands. Nowadays there is a vast information in peer-reviewed literature clearly showing that cross-linking with the Dresden protocol is a way to go in patients with keratoconus, which, by the way, in our area is the incidence is very, very high, as well as providing a tool in the less fortunate cases of ectasia. For sure, it's a mess. Having the patient standing for like an hour for the classic protocol is a mess. And I'm happy that slowly new techniques come up that can minimize the time.
What were the features of the classic protocol? How did you actually do it?
So the idea was that you had the patient lying down for like half an hour, loading the eye with a ribo, so the cornea gets saturated with a chromophore, and then you spend another 30 minutes with a UV at somehow low energy, but this required lots of time. So 1 hour protocol, first putting drops and then irradiating.
And taking the epithelium off beforehand?
Well, you know, there were some attempts to get rid of the removal of the epithelium, which is the big issue with the classic protocol. But studies show that perhaps the epi-on techniques were not that effective as compared to the epi-off.
I'm going to come on to those a little later. Miltos, perhaps I can ask you how the protocols have evolved and what the sort of current state of play is and how the Dresden protocol has been modified over the years.
Yeah, I think we have to give credit to the original standard protocol for saving a lot of eyes from transplant. So this was a big groundbreaking technique. Of course, there are some weaknesses, and the weaknesses were, as Vikentia mentioned, the long time of the treatment, and the thing that the riboflavin with dextran was actually thinning the cornea during the process, and that was a big problem when you have already thin cornea in the beginning. So we had to overcome these sort of problems, and that's where they came, first of all, the accelerated techniques, where you can use the same total energy, but giving it in a higher power, less time, so that is better for the patient's comfort. And the other thing is all these new riboflavins were using, instead of dextran, HPMC, and that maintained the thickness of the cornea, which was very important. I think these are two aspects which changed, but of course, then we realized that some of the too accelerated techniques were not as effective as the standard. So in a way, you have to balance whether you're going to do it in an acceleration which have the same effect as what you expected, whether you're going to do it pulsed or continuous. There are a lot of protocols. I think now we are more or less agreed that the 9 minutes is the golden number that we have to have in mind.
Okay. So what protocols do you use now?
I use, at the moment I used the 9 minutes and the pulsed energy with riboflavin, HPMC riboflavin, which again, it's much faster diffusing and keeps my cornea as thick as in the beginning, which is very important.
Okay. Vicky, what do you do?
The same with me. And apparently, this is the way to go. As you know, you don't have to have that time-consuming therapy in the OR. And on the other hand, I'm not really sure there is a conflicting evidence that timing less than that would allow for the oxygen to do the work. Okay. The oxygen is replenished too fast, and it seems that the thing doesn't work.
Can I actually go back a bit, and what are your indications for doing cross-linking? Say you've got a 25-year-old and he's got obvious keratoconus on the pentacam. When would you do cross-linking? Vicky, perhaps?
Listen, I mean, age matters. And at the end of the day, this is the driving force of whether you decide to do it early or later. Let me give you an example. Let's say that I have a patient who is like 35 years old and appears in the office to correct his or her myopic astigmatism. I do the topo in the office and oops, I have a conus. There are many people in our offices, especially mine that is very much oriented in refractive. The percentage of patients who would come up, claim for refractive surgery and at the end of the day have keratoconus can go up to 10, 12%. This is Greece, remember? In these cases of an older patient, I wouldn't be very much in rush to do cross-linking. I need to make sure that this thing is aggressive, that there is a change throughout time. I will wait for at least 6 months, 1 year, and see a clear difference in the topography or in vision. On the other hand, a young patient of early 20s, even with a glimpse of idea of topographic pattern of keratoconus, I would be very keen to go ahead with cross-linking. With PRK or not, this is an issue we can discuss. Well, but I wouldn't wait to establish progress in these cases.
Okay. And what would you, if you are in the older patient, you're looking to establish progression, what do you regard as significant progression?
Well, the gold standard is supposed to be 1 diopter in keratometry, but the thing is the vision.
Okay.
And in my hands, subjective evaluation of the patient, feeling that gets worse, or vision, best corrected vision going down is the best way to judge whether it's time to go ahead or not.
Okay. Miltos, do you have?
I totally agree with Vicky that the first and most important is to act fast in a younger population. Okay. Because the younger patients are those that you may lose the progression and they may progress within 4 months. So in these cases, I really don't wait for the progression. If I see it, and it's a 15, 16-year-old, yeah. Especially now that we have also, in the area that I have my practice, we have also a lot of immigrants from Syria. And you can see in these cases from Middle East that they progress extremely fast within months. So you have to do something in the very beginning. If they are 25 or 30, then of course you need to see them, and if you want to identify or at least document progression. But again, that's what the problem with cross-linking is, that we have to find a way to do cross-linking without any complications, and that's probably the next question that we're going to discuss after that, because the less complicated, then the better for what it was made for, and it was made to stop the progression, to prevent.
So well, I was going to ask you about epi-on versus epi-off treatment, and if you have any views on that. For me,
okay, the standard is the epi-off, and all the techniques used for the epi-on technique, for the epi-on treatment, showed that it didn't go as deep as we want, and it wasn't as effective. We learn a lot about the oxygen and the role of the oxygen, and we know that there are 2 types of interference in the tissue, one with the oxygen and one without. What we know now is that if we manage to give a higher oxygen concentration around the eye and the pulse, this will let the eye get more oxygen in and use more oxygen during the cross-linking. My experience so far with the new available machine, which has these features, and also where I can customize and treat only the area where the thinning is, showed that we can go down 300 microns and treat it with epi-on procedures. So I think this is very important, because In the younger population, you can treat it avoiding the complications of an open epithelium for 3 or 4 or 5 days, of avoiding the complications of wound healing, of infection, and at the same time prevent cornea from getting more distorted. So I think this is a very good opportunity that we can have in our hands for our younger population. For the older ones, probably if you want to in the same time change the curvature and create a new curvature for a future contact lens user or whatever you like, PRK still has a meaning to use. But for the younger population, I think the new epion procedures are going to be groundbreaking.
For manipulating corneal shape, yeah. Vicky, that's the last question. Can I ask you about combining cross-linking with laser refractive surgery?
Yeah, this is a long conversation. And when it comes to laser, you then argue, should I do it before? Should I do it with cross-linking or should I do it after? I'm going to tell you what I'm doing.
Okay, good.
I'm very, very much selective. I do cross-linking and PRK all together, but under very, very strict rules, meaning first that the patient has to have some good best corrected visual acuity, or else why doing it? The second thing is that I wouldn't be very keen to remove more than 50, let's say 60 microns of tissue. You don't want to thin an already thin cornea. And all this under the condition that removing the epithelium and these 50, 60 microns, you still have your 400 microns mask that you need to protect the endothelium. Under these rules, I have done more than 200 cases now, the last probably decade. And the results are very, very good. I'm very happy with the results. I have very few patients, I must say, that they show a progressive flattening of the cornea. And this is the only issue I'm concerned of. I estimate this percentage in less than 1%. And the bad thing is that you can't foresee who is going to react that way. This is an issue. In my mind, this is the only issue. As for the idea of doing laser later on, meaning cross-link first, to me, it's not such a good idea. Why should I bother first cross-link, let's say, the upper 200, 300 microns of the stroma, and then go ahead on a later date and remove it? It doesn't make sense to me. And I must tell you that in the literature, there's conflicting evidence. I'm not sure that there is any true study showing any benefit out of it.
So if you saw a patient who had form fruus keratoconus, they were -2, and they were desperate for some form of PRK, would you do a combined procedure?
Like I said,
or would you say no, don't treat?
Well, like I said, if I have enough tissue, I mean, form fruchte, usually the patients may have a very thick cornea. If I have some expected good vision out of it, but I underline to the patient and I make it very, very clear that we're not doing this for them to take off the glasses. This is not a refractive procedure. This is a therapeutic procedure that we have the opportunity, if we want, to try to get rid of the glasses. That's the deal. So the patient is fully aware that this is not another PRK procedure.
Okay. Well, Vicky, thank you very much for coming to talk to us. Miltos, it's great pleasure to have you here.
Pleasure to be with you.
For more information on this and any related topics, please visit us at eurotimes.org. Thank you very much.